Good morning. My name is Marie-Michelle Monéreau-Merry, and I am a bilingual speech-language pathologist in the language of Haitian. I am also an advanced doctoral student at the Graduate Center, City University of New York. Dr. Barrière is my co-chair, the head of my dissertation committee. Dr. Maria Polinsky is also part of my dissertation committee. Today, on the behalf of Dr. Kagan, who is unable to be present, I am going to represent the National Heritage Language Resource Center. I will describe their philosophy and pedagogical approaches towards heritage language learners, and I will discuss languages holistically rather than discussing one language in particular, because the mission of the center is to examine heritage speakers globally. Okay, before I begin my presentation, allow me to give you a brief overview. I'm going to begin by describing America's policies towards languages other than English. Historically, the purpose of the National Heritage Language Resource Center, henceforth NHLRC, define heritage speakers, discuss their developmental trajectory in the heritage language, and discuss pedagogical approaches towards expanding their proficiency in the heritage language. The national credo of the Statue of Liberty embodies the philosophy of a melting pot nation. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless tempests tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. But be warned, you must speak your native language no more. The line highlighted in blue is amended by me. I added that line because it conveyed the sentiment of the United States during that era. As expressed by former President Roosevelt under the Square Deal, we were not a nation that would board polyglots. So we were accepting of immigration, but there was only one language that could be spoken in the United States, and it had to be English. But through the evolution of time, there was a political shift as conveyed by the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, who indicated at the conference at the National Foreign Language Summit in 2010, our country needs to create a future in which all Americans understand that by speaking more than one language, they are enabling the United States to compete successfully and work collaboratively with partners across the globe. So, as a result, the U.S. Department of Education began to invest in preserving heritage languages as well as promoting the acquisition of foreign languages by allocating funds to institutions such as UCLA that were known for their excellency and leadership in the field of foreign language studies. The National Heritage Language Resource Center was founded in 2006. It is funded by the U.S. Department of Education. It was recently renewed in 2010. It is one of the 15 National Language Resource Centers, but it is unique because it is the only one dedicated to heritage languages, the study of heritage languages. The center's mission is to research heritage language acquisition and to utilize the data to help create curriculum that is specific to heritage language speakers. Every summer, the Institute also hosts summer research program where there's a meeting of the minds where they discuss psycholinguistic research as well as connecting these findings with pedagogical approaches. This year it will be held at next year it will be held at UCLA. and it will be directed by Maria Polinsky in the month of June. According to our demographics, there's an omnipresence of heritage speakers in the United States, especially here in New York City, in the boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens. It is estimated that there are about 50 to 70% of heritage speakers who are exposed to a language other than English at home. So let me describe heritage speakers. When defining heritage speakers, you can utilize a broad definition or a narrow definition, but the center adopts the narrow definition as proposed by Valdez, who indicates that heritage speakers are individuals who are reared in a home environment where a language other than the societal language is spoken, and they have functional proficiency in that language. However, there is an incomplete acquisition of the language due to insufficient input, because the developmental path of the heritage language is of hybrid formation. It has features of first language acquisition because it occurs from birth and it is in a natural setting, but it has features of second language acquisition because you're going to see variation in the quantitative and the qualitative input that the heritage speaker is exposed to, and that's going to be governed by their social language history. According to Polinsky and Kagan, there is a heritage language continuum, and where they are situated along the continuum is going to be dependent on the degree of reanalysis of the language. The baseline is the home language. It's the reference point when measuring their degree of reanalysis. The earlier exposure to the majority language, and here in the United States it's English, the weaker the heritage language. However, not all the domains in the language are unstable or restructured. However, irrespective of the heritage language, heritage speakers as adults engage in the cognitive process of reanalysis when they're conveying their ideas in the heritage language. What is meant by reanalysis is that they will engage in behaviors such as language transfer, transferring properties from English into their heritage language, overgeneralizing rules, and simplifying rules in the target heritage language. There are various areas of reanalysis, and Dr. Polinsky and Dr. Kagan, they utilize a Swiss cheese analogy when examining the language profile of heritage speakers in the heritage language. They have the infrastructure of the language. However, there's instability in several domains, such as in Spanish, they have difficulty with gender inflection. In Haitian, they have difficulty with the production of the definite articles. Many are semi-literate or illiterate in the heritage language, so as a result, they have impoverished vocabulary skills. In Korean, they do not utilize all the registers. They know informal registers, but not the formal registers. They have difficulty with tense, aspect, and mood in Spanish, and so forth. And this is all due to insufficient input and output in the heritage language, as well as the immigrant language that they're exposed to at home is a contact variety. Their parents come to the United States and they will begin to code switch, so that's the input that they're receiving. And there's also variation in the home language because the home language is not necessarily always the standard variety. And also the language attitudes in that society. Do they appreciate their language? Do they value the language? If they value the language, they are more likely to want to continue speaking the language. I'm going to discuss pedagogical approaches. When teaching heritage language learners, you have to understand your student body. Where where do they fall within the heritage language continuum? Are they generation 1.5, meaning that they were born in the metropolis and then they're immigrated to the United States as children or teenagers? Or are they at generation 2.0, where they're born here in the US or arrived to the United States before the age of 5? Where they're sequential or simultaneous bilinguals? Do they utilize the heritage language in limited ways? And how do they identify themselves? Relearning a language is not difficult if given the appropriate pedagogical materials to reactivate the language. Teachers must be trained how to teach heritage speakers. So here is a curriculum that a heritage language teacher may decide to incorporate, work on their vocabulary, certain grammatical gaps, and their pragmatic competency. One such approach that can be utilized is having the students work in groups and transcribing documentaries by creating subtitles in the target language during the first 3 weeks, and then in weeks 4 to 8, have them translate these subtitles into English. This task will target vocabulary, grammar, and register. During the final weeks, weeks 9 and 10, have the students present to the classroom a synopsis of these documentaries by providing key points to the audience on what the documentaries conveyed, and they have to do it in the target language. And the purpose of that project is to help them utilize academic register. Another project, you can have them engage in an ethnographic project where they're going into the community and they're interviewing seniors. So you have them read information about a certain historical event. For example, with Haitian students or Russian students, talk about what was it like to live during communism, what was it like to live during the Duvalier regime. Then have them go into the community and conduct weekly interviews, and they record, they write these interviews in their diaries, they must submit them to the instructor, and then they do an oral presentation in class. And this type of lesson plan, again, it focuses on vocabulary expansion, and it also corrects their grammar, as well as teaching them the academic register of the language. So, thank you, merci en pile, merci beaucoup. Okay.
Thank you very much, and I love the Swiss cheese. I think all of us who've been teaching, we're always finding surprising little holes in knowledge, and especially, is this working now? Yeah. And so, and I'm hoping at the end, we have time for questions at the end, so we can certainly explore some of the issues, certainly curriculum ideas that will help make use of where the cheese is, not where the holes are, but how to fill in. So.
Whoever can. Hi, I'm Joy Peyton, Center for Applied Linguistics in Washington, D.C., and the Alliance for the Advancement of Heritage Languages. I'm thrilled to be here, and I can already see, based on the, there we go. Based on the first, thank you so much, few presentations that we've had, that we're already building on each other in a major way. I'm going to talk about vitality of French as a heritage language in the United States. And I'm going to use a framework that a group of people, Grin, Flaherty, Joe Lobianco. I know Joe Lobianco best, and he's written quite a few articles about this framework to look at language vitality. They were using it in language revitalization and intergenerational transmission projects, particularly to do revitalization of Irish. I'm sorry, first I'll give my overview that I'm going to talk about this framework, then I'm going to look just specifically at French in the United States, And then I'm going to look very quickly at a couple efforts to promote language vitality. So the language vitality framework, I already said something about it. And basically they say that if a language is going to be vital or revitalized, that more than language learning in school needs to happen. There needs to be increased language capacity, and Marie-Michelle was talking about increased language capacity, opportunities to use the language, and desire to use the language, and that these three components have to be in place. So language capacity is personal language proficiency and use, ability to use the language and actual use of it in both formal and informal contexts can create that. So it can be sufficient to produce language proficiency if we have formal contexts for learning and opportunities for informal use in intimate settings, family, community, and so forth. And more proficient speakers will use the language more. That probably goes without saying, but I think it's worth mentioning. But capacity or proficiency is not enough. Without domains in which the use of the language is expected, is natural and is welcome, no amount of formal instruction or informal learning and intimacy will result in language vitality. There also have to be opportunities in social, academic, workplace settings where use of the language is not only okay to do, but it's expected. And then finally, desire. That we can have, if we're going to convert capacity and opportunity into actual language use, then there has to be some reason to use the language. It brings certain rewards. It's worth it. It's worth it for some reason. It's learning the language, being proficient in the language is a worthwhile pursuit. Okay, so that's the framework. Now, I want to talk for a second specifically about French in the United States. Then I'm going to come back to language vitality of French. How am I doing? Okay. What I'm talking about now primarily comes from an article by Albert Waldman in the book Language Diversity in the USA, edited by Kim Potowski and published by Cambridge University Press. This book is well worth looking at. She has different authors talking about the 12 most spoken languages in the US, and French is one. So the book is published in 2010, so Waldman's data primarily come from 2007. The numbers have changed slightly. American Community Survey numbers are different, but the trends are basically, I think, the same, and we can talk more about this later. But French is the most commonly spoken non-English language, fourth most commonly spoken language after Spanish, Chinese, and Tagalog, and this is based on both number of speakers and number of speakers who report speaking the language very well or well. French has experienced a decline in numbers in the United States from 1990 to 2000 and from 2000 to 2007. Why? Okay, what are the trends? Low levels of immigration of French speakers, and David Lasserre and I were talking about this earlier. And I mean, we really need to look at the numbers, but level of immigration is an important factor. Intergenerational transmission is another important factor. And Waldman claims because of limited intergenerational transition, vernacular varieties of French are experiencing severe attrition. Whoa, that's a strong word. Decreasing use of the language. This is just one community that Waldman talks about. Acadian communities in Louisiana, and you can see the numbers going down in use of French from grandparents to parents to young people to children. And then the teaching of French in schools and what that looks like. In colleges and universities, it's still the second most studied language after Spanish, and experienced a slight increase from 2002 to 2006. That's based on the survey of university programs by the Modern Language Association, in a survey that the Center for Applied Linguistics conducted of foreign language instruction in the United States, we find decrease in elementary school and secondary school from 87 to 2008. You can see a decrease in, this is of schools that offer foreign language instruction, what percentage of that instruction is French? That's what these percentages represent. Okay, so those are some factors that that are always important to look at when we're looking at a specific language. Now let's just talk for a second, going back to the framework and the effort that we're involved in, which is to promote the vitality of French in the United States. And I think it's important to take a sociolinguistic perspective on this in addition to the framework, and that is who says what to whom, when, where, why, and how do they feel about it. And both Marcelo Suarez Orozco and Marie Michel were referring to this to this perspective in different ways. Okay, so here, what I'm just encouraging us to do is to take the programs that we're working with, the communities that we're interested in, New York City, Louisiana, Miami, and other emerging communities, and just ask questions about capacity, opportunity, and desire. So capacity, who's able to say or write what to whom, how? What does, when we talk about capacity, when we talk about proficiency, what does that include? And Marcelo gave quite a few things that includes: self-presentation, interaction and engagement, social language, academic language, many arenas. What's the proficiency of students when they arrive, and how do we know? I always want to know, how do we know? Marcelo referred to a lot to global competence, and we'll probably hear later this afternoon about Harvard Project Zero and the desire to build global competence, not only community competence or ability to function effectively in the United States, but global competence, which includes understanding the world, understanding others' perspectives, communicating ideas, and taking action, or being able, deciding, and then being able to make a difference in the situation, to make improvements. There's a lot more to say about all of those. Capacity, how is capacity maintained? Then there's questions about resources that we have. What funding do we have? What instructional staff? What are their qualifications? What are their abilities? What curriculum? What materials? What standards are we using? What assessments are we using to track progress? All of the resources to promote capacity. Opportunity, in what domains is use of the language natural, welcome, and expected? What varieties are acceptable? What varieties are valued? And I just want to read a quote from Waldman, because this is, we can say we value all language varieties. Ana and I know from experience in Spanish that this is very often not true. This is what Waldman says about French. The presence of standard French, reinforced by its use in schools, negatively affects the maintenance of indigenous vernacular varieties, and these varieties assume a limited functional role. Am I finished? Okay, I will just. Okay, I'll just flip through these very quickly, maybe one more minute. Lots of things to think about with opportunity, including social networks, media, and so forth. How do we create desire? How do we build it? How do we maintain it? We at the Center for Applied Linguistics created the advancement for the Alliance for the Advancement of Heritage Languages because we wanted to build a place where we could think systematically together about these questions. So there's the URL, all of our activities. We have a database of programs which can be searched by language, state, type of program. There's a search for French, and then you can go specifically into the program. There's the program in Louisiana. A lot of the programs that are represented, we'll be hearing about today, are in the database. We write Heritage Voices. David Lasserre wrote about the French language and its importance to speakers in the United States. David and then Benoit wrote about heritage, French Heritage Language Program. You'll be hearing about it later. The reason that I'm very passionate about this is because we have conferences and we talk, and then I keep going, yeah, but we need to preserve this. And so we've put it on a website. We're working on a French language spotlight. We're working on a brief on French heritage language schools in the United States. We need to have a French language representative on our website. Surendra Gambhir, who's watching the webcast, is one of our language representatives. We have a newsletter. We'd love for you to sign up and stay in touch with us. There are many ways to get involved. And then we've expanded that to the National Consortium of Language Program Databases. And I want to just mention that because the National Heritage Language Resource Center is one of the partners. What we said is, well, we can't just work in isolation. We want to bring everybody in. And so that's our intention, is to work together. And this conference is a great opportunity for us to do that. And thank you for, I don't know how to get out, but there we are.
I know that you really should go home and look at the website and the resources that are fabulous there. And if you have a heritage program that's not on Joy's website, on the Cal website, you need to make sure that it gets added. It's a fabulous resource for all kinds of languages and all kinds of programs. So.
Do you want to say something? Thank you. I'm Christine Hélot. I'm a university professor at the University of Strasbourg in France. And basically my field is educational linguistics and bilingual education. I want to start by thanking a few people who are here for making it possible for me to be here today. Fabrice Jaumont of the French Embassy, Benoit Ledevedec, also of the Embassy, David Lasserre, who is here today and who made it possible also for me to start a research project here in New York, which I will talk about later on in this presentation. I want to thank Jane Ross and Alfred Ross for their wonderful hospitality and also making it possible for me to start being interested in bilingual education and heritage languages in the States. I want to thank also two people who are here, Thierry Guéroux and Émilie Schiffer, for accepting to work with me on a new project here in New York. And last but not least, Mariette Feltin, the filmmaker, whose film you will see later on this afternoon, and with whom it's very nice to share my work, particularly since she is very engaged in educational matters, matters of social cohesion, and also sharing my ethnographic approach and accompanying me in many schools from morning to evening, watching children learn in several languages. I'm going to take you to France, and you see the subtitle of my presentation, Where are our heritage languages? It's a strange question because the terminology you use here obviously is difficult to apply in the French context, but nevertheless, or maybe makes no sense in the French context. I see some people frowning, but I'm going to explore this question. Just to present quickly the French context and immigration in France today, you have figures here which come from our national statistics institution, INSEE, which date from the analysis of the last census. And what you see basically are figures which should deconstruct some fears about immigration, which can be quite widespread, that our figures for foreigners is no more than in 1930. And of course we have to make a difference between foreigners, in other words, people who do not have French nationality but who live in France, and immigrants who have French nationality, but unfortunately some who keep being seen as, let's say, outsiders in our society. And of course, these figures and the census do not show the number of undocumented immigrants in France, because we can't have these figures, obviously. The research in the field of immigration in France, from the educational point of view or from the linguistic point of view, hasn't been as widespread as in the United States, for example, but recently a lot of research is coming out and is being produced. So I would recommend Extramana and Sibyl on the languages spoken today in France, and a very interesting volume by Athias Donfu and Wolf on children of immigrants, which is a very extensive research and which just came out last year. Just a table to show you where immigrants come from in France, and I'm sure most of you know this: North Africa, obviously, Portugal, but also southern European countries like Italy and Spain, Turkey, which are the most recent immigrants to France, Tunisia as well, but we also have, of course, people who come to work in France from Europe and the United Kingdom, Germany, Belgium, Poland, but also from further away, Vietnam, China, and lots of people from Africa, like Senegal being the biggest community of African people in France. A quick note on terminology and the use of heritage in my subtitle. You use this term in the USA, you also use it it's used in Canada. What's interesting in Canada is the French translation of heritage, which is patrimonial, which is an interesting term which we obviously don't use in France. In Britain, I work with a lot of colleagues in Britain, they use the term community language, which we can't use in France because, because of our constitution, we don't really have legally recognized communities. Languages other than English used in Australia, but I've heard it used here as well. And then we need for France to look at European text where the terms used are regional minority languages. These are the, if I can call them that, endogenous languages of Europe, the historically present languages in Europe. And then sometimes you see immigrant languages and migrant languages, which are terms which of course I question because it's not languages that migrate, it's people who migrate with their languages. In France, we use these two terms, langue régionale, and then it's really confusing in the education sector because at primary level, we use langue d'origine. And then suddenly langue d'origine tend to disappear at secondary level and they become langues orientales, which makes it unclear for a lot of educational authorities, parents, and researchers. Language education in France is very developed. Compulsory for all students, we start teaching one foreign language, as we call it. I'm using the terminology which is common, from age 7. So all children in France learn, the model is extensive teaching, which is 2 to 3 hours per week, foreign language, and the choice in the primary curriculum is out of 8 languages. The 8 languages are English, German, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, and Arabic. From age 11, students in France have to learn, this is compulsory, a second foreign language, and there's a choice of 56 languages that they can take for the baccalaureate. You can find all these 56 languages in the official bulletin of 2008. And what's interesting is we also have a policy at university level that all students of all disciplines, whether it is law, medicine, or French, or whatever, have to take a foreign language and graduate in that foreign language, with that foreign language. Optional teaching of languages, also extensive, 2 to 3 hours a week. We teach what we call enseignement des langues et cultures régionales. That concerns Breton, Basque, Catalan, Occitan, Creole, and so on. And languages on the same model, languages and cultures of origin. Enseignement d'une langue et culture d'origine, and these exist still since the 70s. Bilingual education should also be mentioned because it is developing very fast and being very strongly supported by the Ministry of Education. But the organization of bilingual education is complex because it's available according to the partial immersion model for so-called regional languages only. This is a model which is 50% of the school subjects taught through French and 50% taught through the regional language, for example, Breton, or in Alsace, where I come from, it's German. This model cannot be used for foreign languages. It's another model which is in place, which is widely known in Europe, the CLIL model, Content and Language Integrated Learning, or in French, EMIL, enseignement d'une matière intégrée à enseignement d'une matière intégrée à une langue étrangère. This CLIL model is developed mostly at secondary level, and it means that students learn one or two school subjects through the foreign language. That is, for example, learning mathematics through German or learning physics through English. From the research point of view, what's interesting in this general framework of language education in France is the gap between policy and practice. It would be very easy to criticize policy, but in fact the policy is quite is rich because it gives many possibilities. But what happens in schools, in fact, is very different from what is possible from the policy point of view. If you look at the statistics of students learning foreign languages, according to whatever model, you see a dominance of English, which is very marked at primary level. Nearly 90% of children learn English, although they could be learning other languages, including Arabic, for example, which we could consider a heritage language. The reason for this policy in France of teaching and offering so many languages in the curriculum is to diversify the language on offer in our schools. This diversification is supposed to fight the hegemony of English. The problem is most parents want English for their children. We are not the only country in Europe with this problem. And the teaching of a second foreign language gives a space for other languages than English, but most students and most parents want English before anything else. Arabic, very interestingly, has been part of the foreign language teaching curriculum at primary level since 1995. But if you look at the statistics, it's 0.0%. I don't know how you come up with such a statistic, but it means nobody's learning Arabic as a foreign language at primary school. Look at secondary school, it's the same. It's even more. English is 97.7%, which means 5 million students learning English. And you see all the other languages offered, very few students. So heritage languages, where are they and how are they taught? Yes. I can see it's time, but I'm just having just 2 more slides and I'll finish up. Languages and cultures of origin, you can see what languages we could be talking about according to our curriculum. And the one which has the most vitality, if I talk in your term, is Turkish, the most recent immigrants. Half of these children continue learning their home languages through these classes, which are obviously non-obligatory classes, optional. And all these languages can be taken at the back level, but they can also, some of these languages are also offered in bilingual education in sections which are called Oriental sections. Arabic, Mandarin, Japanese, Vietnamese are the ones which are being offered through CLIL model. Bilingual education very quickly in France is developing in regional languages and in what we call sections, which are European sections or Oriental sections. So basically, heritage languages could fit in these Oriental sections because heritage languages, most of them are not European. So bilingual education is really devised to develop a European identity, which makes it more difficult to fit in heritage languages. Quickly, I want to compare France and the US, and obviously it's very difficult because of a different historical, political, cultural context, in particular in relation to migration and educational culture. And obviously policies in France and practice as well, as far as language education, bilingual education and so on, is very marked by influenced by European policies. Early teaching of foreign languages, European policies since 2002 that at least 2 languages other than the national language should be taught, and a very strong support not only for bilingual education but for plurilingual education, which is really how to develop European identity. The major challenge when you want to compare two educational spaces is, in fact, in France or in Europe, it's not only France, the integration of languages of origin in the general language policy in education. The education of whom we call migrant children, and specifically the support in the first language of these children. The main objective in France, but also in Germany, which I know well, is the acquisition of the school language as fast as possible, and this is seen as the way to social cohesion, and this is what can be questioned from the research point of view with the work which is being done, particularly in the United States. Basically, what I'm starting to analyze, if you know, is the position of bilingual education in the United States, and you all know the states which have passed law against bilingual education. And why are people afraid of bilingual education? Because when you go and spend time in schools, as I have for the past 2 weeks in schools here, every day, what you see is incredible pedagogical innovation when you look at children learning through two languages, French and English, for example, in the dual programs here. This is my last slide. I think from the point of view of research, we have to look first at the political dimension of languages in society, the relationships of power between languages, and how much linguistic capital each language can bring, and how we can change these relationships of power from the educational point of view and from primary level. The ideological dimension of languages, which is different but obviously linked to politics, attitudes and beliefs towards different languages and towards different types of pedagogy. I was very surprised to hear bilingual teachers in the school I was visiting talking about these children as ELL. Still talking about bilingual children as English language learners. These were French speakers coming into the American education system, and obviously I reacted immediately. And heritage language speakers also, why couldn't we call them bilingual speakers or plurilingual speakers? And I think here maybe from the European point of view, we could bring you all the work on notions such as plurilingual competence. The role of values, of course, in this education, values such as inclusion and equity. And multilingual education, I think, has everything to do with social justice. Not just social cohesion, I would go further, but social justice. So, and of course, the whole problem of assessment, I will not address this, but as I'm also a teacher educator, I think the role of teachers as change agents is a particular issue which is dear to me and which I hope to take further through a comparative approach between your educational system, space and philosophy and ours in France. I want to finish with the last quote in French, which comes from Strasbourg. You can recognize the cathedral. This is my favorite children's author, Tommy Ungerer, who became famous all over the world by coming to New York City at the age of 18 without any diploma, not even a baccalaureate, and without any money. And he's one of the most famous authors today. And this was made possible because he decided to move from Alsace to this wonderful city here. And you can read the quote, but it's all about being creative once you start collect languages. And it's all about having fun with languages and what you can do when you have several languages. Among other things, you can watch a sunset with 4 different languages, so you can have 4 different sunsets. And at the astral level, it's much better than only looking at one sunset. Merci beaucoup, thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine, and I think some of us, as Anna comes up, some of us in education in the United States feel, oh, everything would be ideal if only we had more languages in our curriculum, and we understand from the French experience, the answers are not so simple. They can be there, but there's more, and I think maybe that will be among the questions that Joy and others can help us address. All right, Anna?
Yes, thank you very much. I studied French only a couple of semesters, but I would like to say bonjour, and merci mille fois to the organizers. Thank you very much to Benoit Ledevesque and everyone responsible for bringing me here. It's a pleasure. Thank you. As you know, I am in Spanish, and I would like to speak a little bit about some of the things that I have been speaking about, which have to do with engagement and teaching of Spanish as a heritage language. But since the topic is social cohesion, I would like to end on that topic. And so my PowerPoint I'll leave for toward the end. If you let me know when I'm done with about 5 or 6 minutes, I will then go on to the PowerPoint and leave with that, because I think it might be good for, yes, it will be good maybe for the discussion at the end. Let me right off the bat say that I come from Miami, where about 60% of the people now there speak Spanish. I have a friend from Drew University who was here recently this week, and she was marveled at how she could go everywhere and hear Spanish. So in that sense, Miami is different because the population that speaks Spanish is very concentrated, whereas in New York there's so many people from so many places that speak different languages, but there's primarily English, Spanish, and French also, and Haitian Creole. You have places like Hialeah and Little Havana, where 94% of the people identify as Hispanics. So it's an interesting situation for the United States. The number of heritage language learners enrolled in secondary college-level courses for Spanish for native speakers that we also call SNS, or Spanish for bilinguals, or Spanish for heritage learners, or Spanish for U.S. Latinos, has increased substantially. These courses, as we know, started in the 1970s as separate tracks for those courses that are Spanish as a foreign language, in order to address the pedagogical and linguistic needs of all Spanish students, and not just the needs of those who are studying Spanish as a foreign language. In the Spanish teaching profession, then, we can point to all the various organizations like the AATSP, the Center for Applied Linguistics, the National Foreign Language Center, ACTFL, and other agencies and projects. There have been national conferences, special interest groups, special sessions addressing the needs of native speakers. So we kind of have been at this a little bit longer because of the size of the Hispanic population. In other words, although there is always more that we can always do to improve curriculum placement, program funding, textbooks, materials, and so on, including teaching assistant training, the profession actually now has been taking a role as a key player in professional development where teaching Spanish as a heritage language is concerned. So now we have a lot of things that are in place in many universities. Instructors need to be aware that heritage learners are not a monolithic group, and this goes the same for French or for other groups. Some of these students have been using Spanish at home and when possible in their communities, and others have used the language in their own Spanish-speaking country before moving to the United States. So it's understandable there are multiple factors that will affect the acquisition, development of the language, the exposure to and the use of informal as well as its formal registers, language use in different contexts or situations, the development of vocabulary through reading, interaction, and listening, idiomatic expressions, and cultural knowledge so essential to language expansion and maintenance as well. Several environments, I think, are very important for heritage speakers of Spanish, and I would add for any other heritage language, in order to develop the language skills that we would want them to have. These are, one, the home environment, two, the classroom environment, and then the community environment. And we could add today the virtual environment. The heritage language learner's home language environment is essential to developing not only informal conversational skills, vocabulary, different registers, but also it's key to acquiring knowledge of all kinds of Hispanic cultures, both the students and the rest of the Spanish-speaking world. Parents serve as role models in terms of the language combination or combination of languages that they use or don't use with their families. Parents, family, and friends also, of course, play important roles in development of positive attitudes toward the language, whether spoken or written, and the culture and the people that it represents. The formal language learning environment of the classroom is also important, of course. As part of reading discussion assignments, the heritage learner class needs to include linguistic topics, topics on bilingualism, cultural themes that are appropriate to the interests and abilities of the age of the students. And it makes sense, for example, to include topics such as cultural and linguistic identity, attitudes towards bilingualism, facts about the advantages of bilingualism in the United States and in the world in general, and issues of historical and contemporary cultural interest. Hand in hand with a thematic approach, content-based instruction and cooperative learning are two of the various language teaching approaches that also lend themselves well to the heritage language class. Students are able then to engage in interesting discussions and learn content while also using the language that they need to practice in different contexts in order to develop the various registers they lack or that are weak in. At the same time, students can also interact with each other in small groups and pairs through cooperative learning class projects and can be assigned based on readings and class interests. The community environment is also important because it plays a different role that can be very supportive of parents, teachers, and students' efforts at developing linguistic abilities in the heritage language. Conversely, it can also be a detrimental factor if there is no direct community support for the development of our students' bilingualism and culture. So a selected virtual community based on the instructor-recommended websites is by no means a substitute for direct community interaction and involvement. However, properly chosen websites related to class readings and activities then assigned in conjunction with the appropriate tasks can provide a rich environment of a more thematic reading, such as news, features, autobiographies, and so on. One of the questions I asked, since I want to tie it into the idea of social cohesion and being active and proactive and also activist, is why not a major national educational campaign pro-bilingualism in the US? I have a quote here from John Lennon: a dream you dream alone is only a dream you dream together becomes reality. And I want to encourage you here at the end, since I'm the last speaker, to be active and to try to connect with not just ourselves speaking to the choir, to teachers, and to organizations, but we need to think about what we want to do in our communities and in our country as well regarding heritage languages. So what is possible? Let's see. Let's look at some examples of how one country, as an example, Spain has changed from the many decades of Franco's repressive dictatorship to the new social environment and more just and equal civil laws that it enjoys. So if we can change certain things, we can also change things having to do with linguistic issues. So what comes first, the laws that are changed or the attitudes of the people? What's first? Spain, for example, has come a long way in linguistic issues and other issues such as sexual orientation rights, much more than in the US, where gays can get married, for instance, where linguistic rights are by law. In places like in Catalonia, a certain percentage of the news and TV and the media must be in Catalan. So there's a lot of things that have attained equality. In women's rights also, for example, she was pregnant when she was named, the Minister of Defense is a woman, and there she is, pregnant, reviewing her troops. So what comes first, the laws or what? As we know, there's a global, we're talking about globalization, there's a lot of unemployment in Spain. It's one of the countries that's most affected with a lot of unemployment. Let me see if we can see that. How do I bring this down a little bit? One of the things that I notice is that the movement of the indignant ones, as they're called, the indignados. I go to Spain every summer, and I participated actually in one of the protests of the indignados in Seville. I marched with families and dogs and children and everyone who was indignado about the situation. And in the United States, finally, the movement has come to Wall Street. But I read about it a lot more extensively in El País before it hit CNN. And CNN would maybe show at the time 2 minutes of it. Now they're showing more because it's spread. But people, in other words, there are certain things that we need to come out of the university and demand. In language education, getting back to our topic, who are the indignant ones? Are we indignant about anything related to language? Where are they? Where should they be? What should we be advocating for? And why should they or we be advocating anything related to language education and bilingualism? And I think that our keynote speaker really hit the spot in so many important issues that we do need to get indignado about and do something positive, and not only through conferences and to us. Substantial increase in the enrollment of Spanish as a heritage language, also called SNS, Spanish for native speakers, approximately 50 million Hispanics in the United States. Why are we demanding more bilingual education? There is bilingual education, but there's not enough access to everyone who wants it. And also there's a lot of people in the community who don't understand it. Even the parents are against it. I want my child to learn English. they don't understand all the wonderful things that we heard about in the keynote. So where is the socio-political focus in our efforts? Our socio-political focus is lacking. There is a need for education about benefits of language development and bilingualism in general. Families are not to be blamed for anti-immigrant environment. What can we do? These are some of the questions that I'm just, going around in my head. How can we become better activists to promote what we study, know from our research, and take a position as advocates? Who should be the main players then? We're always asking that. Well, individuals and groups and communities and cities, local government, county government, state governments, federal government. There's so many levels where we can be working and should be working. National and international companies who deal with trade, global markets, and our own linguistic minority markets here in the US. The media. How often do we sit down and write a good editorial that hits the New York Times or the Washington Post about the things that we're talking about here today and their importance? And then the academic profession in a number of key disciplines, such as languages, of course, law, political science, medicine, sciences, international studies. Academics and language, the professional associations, they are now finally involved. They weren't 25 years ago, they weren't at all. This is so new here in the United States. But what can they do? And I've said this before actually in an article. What can they do to promote a better understanding of other cultures and languages and the need to learn another language because we know all the benefits, both as a foreign language and also the development as a heritage language. I don't see here the things that I see in Spain, for example, that are giant billboards that deal with social issues of civil justice and education. I see billboards about preventing child abuse. I see billboards about social equality. I see billboards about AIDS. I see billboards about gay rights. I see an education campaign paid for by the government on many social issues that here are absent, except for say no to drugs years ago, and maybe a few other things. With the centers also, the Title VI grant and so on, and the UCLA Center. And I wanted to kind of end on this note that I think that as academics, we do, of course, do research, and we write, and we publish, and we go to conferences, but at some point, it would be a very good idea for the U.S. to try to bring the discussion to a national level to the citizens, outside of academia. And maybe we can talk about these things in the round table here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.